Hello there. Welcome to my leather shop. My name is George Hurst. In this program, we will show how to make a top quality belt bag in the steampunk style with an all-around gusset. In a future program, we will show how to make other belt bags with end gussets, but for this program, we will deal with the all-around gusset only. To get started, I will take some tracing film, and notice I have paper clipped it over my pattern, and now I will trace my pattern onto the tracing film. You'll notice this line right here in the center. I will draw that with a ruler so that I get a nice straight line. When we cut our leather, we'll be cutting two parts from this pattern. From this line in this direction will be the front of the bag, and the whole thing will be the back, the top, and the flap. On the you'll notice some dotted lines here. On these dotted lines, they will be on the back only. This is where we will fasten the belt loop. There are 3 circles here, and we'll talk about them later. We may or may not trace them on at this time because that's the position we will use for the lock we're going to use on here. So we will now very carefully trace this outline with a pencil. Since the gusset and the belt loop are perfect rectangles, we will not trace them. We will use a ruler and a knife to cut them to the proper size. After we have traced all around the outer portion, I will now put 4 marks, one on each end of these dotted lines. We will use that to locate our belt loop when the time comes. Now I will take my tracing and place it on a piece of 6 to 7 ounce good quality vegetable tanned leather, and I can see the area there where my piece will be, so I'm going to take a sponge and lightly dampen this area. Don't need a lot of water, just need it to cover that area and have it on the surface. Now we will wait a few minutes for the water to penetrate into the leather somewhat. Next, I will place my pattern on the leather, as you can see, and I will do it making sure that I have dampened that area. Now I will use a tracing stylus, and I will trace around the outer perimeter. And on this one, I'll be tracing for the part that is the back, the top, and the flap. So I will trace the entire pattern. It's a good idea to check to see that you're getting a good line, and we are, so we can continue. Good idea to check it from time to time. Make sure when we're doing the back and the flap that we mark the 4 holes for the belt keeper. I have dampened another area of my leather So now I'll bring my pattern back in and I will trace for the front part. As I mentioned before, we have this line, so I'll just make 2 marks on either end of that line. Then I will trace the outer perimeter just as we did for the other part. I've decided to use the lock type clasp, so I'm going to mark the 3 holes that we'll punch to fasten part of that lock clasp. This, of course, depends on what kind of a clasp you're going to use. And now we're ready to cut these parts. And now with the knife of your choice, we will cut out the parts that we just traced. For the top of the front part, since it's a straight line, I will use a straight edge to cut that. And then I will continue cutting as before. For the top of the front part, since it's a straight line, I will use a straight edge to cut that. And then I will continue cutting as before. I have decided to use this lock type clasp so I can now punch holes for rivets. I've already marked them on here, and with the 1/8 inch drive punch I will punch the 3 holes as needed for that clasp. 3 holes in the front part and 2 holes in the back and the flap part. Now, if we're going to do any tooling, dyeing, and finishing of these parts, now's the time to do it. To make my gusset, I'll need a strip of leather 2 1/4 inches wide from 3 to 4 ounce leather. So it's about 15 inches long, and the belt loop is the same width, and just about 4 inches long, so I'll make a strip about 20 inches long. To make my gusset, I have cut a strip 2 1/4 inches wide and about 20 inches long. This is long enough to make my gusset and my belt loop. So the first thing I'll do is square off one end, and by looking at my pattern, I know that my gusset is 14 3/4 inches long, so I can mark that, and I'll take my square and cut off the other end. The belt loop is 3 1/2 inches long, so I will put a mark right here I'll use my square. And we will cut this one off at 3.5 inches. And now our gusset and our belt loop are ready to go. For the front part, I will bevel the top and the back side, and I will do the edges on the top side only. We will be cementing this up to the gusset, so it's not necessary to do that at this time. We'll only do the front part. Now for the back and the flap, I will go all the way around on the top side. Now we will turn it over, and I have made 2 marks here with a pencil, and we will only bevel the back side on the top and the flap. At this time, we will not bevel the parts that cement up to the gusset. And then we will dampen these edges. Let it penetrate for a few moments. I like to use the round slicker, and I will then slick this top until it's nice and smooth. I will do the same thing to the top and the flap part, from here on around to here. At this time, I would like to prepare for the stitching and or lacing. The first thing I'll do is put my pattern back on my leather piece, and I will make a mark where the position of the front would be. And then I will take my wing dividers and set it up to about 1/8 of an inch. And I will mark a line around the edge 1/8 inch wide. I will do this only up to the same height as the front. This is where we will stitch the gusset in place. We will not stitch the flap. Now we will do the same thing to the front part. I will do it around the sides and the bottom. I will not mark it along the top. Next, I will take a 3/32 inch thonging chisel, and I will punch along the line that we just scribed. And we'll do this all the way around the sides and the bottom of the front, and the same thing with the back. And there are our 2 parts all ready for stitching.